Assalamu alaikum. I've often thought to myself, why is the Mecca Haram almost always in a state of expansion? Every time you visit, you're greeted by cranes, construction, expansion projects which never seem to end. A supposed $21 billion project to expand the Grand Mosque to accommodate 300,000 additional pilgrims was announced back in 2015. A further $26 billion Mecca project for so-called high-end hotels, residences, retailers and restaurants was further announced. Infamously often referred to as a Manhattanization of Mecca, which in essence was stripping away of traditional Arab architecture, Ottoman history and replacing it by concrete buildings resembling Manhattan, eliminating religious, spiritual, historical landmarks and promoting yet further commercialization, consumerism in a place and a time which really should be focused on exactly the opposite, providing a deeper spiritual, ideological and religious boost and connection. It begs the question, are these projects really all to accommodate the ever-growing number of pilgrims, or is there something more sinister going on? How much of it is a distraction tactic by the authorities designed to please the eye of the pilgrim at the wonders of the Grand Mosque, such that he fails to see or even question the sheer failures of the regime at providing elementary services to the pilgrims, or is distracted to recognize the authorities' outright flagrant violation and disregard at openly supporting pro-Zionist businesses in the Haram itself. But I tell you what is even more alarming. Some of us actually think that the Saudi authorities are doing us a favor or are so generous in their spend and maintenance on the Grand Mosque, its expansion and upkeep, as if they are spending from their personal wealth. Nothing could be more further from the truth. It is neither any favor, gift or charity they are giving. On the contrary, did you know, it is the Saudi authorities that are hugely benefiting, in fact exploiting and systematically abusing this unilateral, unparalleled, coveted control of the two sacred harams. Did you know that the Saudi authorities earn far more from Hajj and Umrah than they ever spend on the Grand Mosque? According to some estimates, it's earning in the region of $15 to $30 billion a year from Hajj and Umrah, which is about 4% of Saudi's annual GDP. Now it targets to increase this to 30 million pilgrims a year by 2030. And that is a massive $80 billion a year it will be earning from Hajj and Umrah, which is about 10% of its annual GDP. So it's very clear for all to see, it is the Saudi authorities who are benefiting extortionately from the Grand Mosque and not vice versa. Not to mention, it is their obligation and duty which the great tribes of Jurham, Quraysh and the Khulafa Rashidin and then the Khilafah after them discharged over the centuries with far greater zeal, honor and professionalism than the current cahoot. The truth of the matter is that many of us actually lose true perspective and get distracted by the sight and the expansiveness of the Grand Mosque and its architecture, the token gestures of Ramadan iftar packs or provisioning of water or Hajj packs, or a railway system which has arrived decades far too late, or a grotesque, wasteful clock tower and its associated concrete tower blocks, or even the domineering presence and projection of Starbucks, Hardee's and other Western labels upon the pilgrims. I mean, how many of us actually question the sheer magnitude of wastefulness, the gross mismanagement, the negligence, the corruption, the nepotism, absolute disregard for the Ummah's strategic resources? For example, the cost of maintaining the so-called royal family is estimated by some to be about $10 billion per year. The wasteful clock tower in the region of $15 billion to boast the world's largest clock. You have $500 billion being wasted in creating a Zion Las Vegas style city in the desert, when you have established cities like Jeddah which fail every year with floods, killing Muslims annually. You have sports washing, which has cost almost $7 billion over the last 3 years only. And then there is the drive to push, promote Zionist businesses and labels in the Haram, which the world over are being boycotted even by the non-Muslim pro-Palestine supporters. In fact, if we look with an objective eye, we would see abject failures of the Saudi regime in many of the areas, from providing service to pilgrims, the ability to provide scalable provisions for increased demand, or the failure to provide a spiritual and ideological experience, all of which should await the pilgrim. Trillions in petrodollars over the years, yet abject failure in providing adequate washroom facilities for pilgrims in the Grand Mosque is absolutely shocking. These are so woeful, inadequate when stress tested, such as in the peak seasons of Ramadan or Hajj. Take a cursory look at what happens here in Ramadan, in Mina, or the road from Mecca to Medina or beyond, and you get my point. It simply beggars belief stampedes are not a more regular occurrence due to the sheer inadequate and negligence in crowd control by the authorities. Iftar time reaches breaking point during Ramadan. Insanely, food outlets are located 3 or 4 story high in useless shopping malls whose single or dual escalator systems cease working at stress peak times, causing bottlenecks and risk of stampedes. There isn't even a staircase equivalent or basic common sense thinking. Why not have food outlets on the ground or lower floors? Let's talk about transportation. Elementary infrastructure, yet chaotic and an absolute mess to say the least, if not a life-threatening exercise. Try taking a taxi from the airport with a local driver and you know what I mean. Or a private taxi from Mecca to Medina or elsewhere. You'll find it disjointed, chaotic, primitive and an exploitative process. Coaches, if you're unfortunate enough to need shuttle services, coach pickup or drop-off points are totally unorganized, chaotic, toxic, totally mismanaged, and you can spend hours looking or waiting for a coach due to the lack of order. Road traffic, goes without saying, is an absolute mess. Mecca to Medina road washroom services and provisions are almost unbelievable, and the study of roads, tunnels have found very high levels of ozone, carbon monoxide. The harmful effects of the fumes has led to some comment, pilgrims spend more time coughing than praying. Let's talk about something more elementary. How about the Haram communication or information points for pilgrims? Don't exist. Which are the men-only zones versus the women areas? Where are the smart zone prayer system? Where are the communication points, the digital dashboards or displays showing occupancy levels, capacity, closures, time zones, areas of the Haram, maps, meaningful information points, or even perhaps stewards who speak other than Arabic and actually know something about their surroundings? Now you're asking for too much. None of it practically or meaningfully exists. Instead, you're greeted majority of the time by seasonal stewards or military officials who are monolingual, who kick you out from your place of worship at will, and they close areas at will without any obvious or logical reasoning. Last but not least, digitalization. The entire digitalization process, also known as nusuk, has been an absolute mess, and let's leave it exactly there. Technology is being used, but I tell you what it's being used for. It's being used for surveillance, intelligence gathering, and spying on the pilgrims rather than facilitation of services. All of this demonstrates the following points. Number 1, the authorities are more interested in profiteering by spending the bare minimum. Number 2, the agenda to promote Western consumerism, Western Zionist brands, goods and services. Number 3, to secure mega profits for Western construction firms, Western consultancies, Western hospitality firms and hotel companies. Number 4, the House of Saud is not fit for purpose in being the custodian of the 2 sacred harams. And lastly, number 5, it is the pilgrim, the Muslims, who are paying the price. Even at face value, I would argue its target of an increased intake of pilgrims Expanding the Grand Mosque alone is not sustainable, as the authorities fail miserably to deliver upon the infrastructure that is needed to support such growth. The fact of the matter is that the House of Saud was never formed to serve Islam, or to propagate Islam, or to be the true guardians of the two sacred Harams, or to be the servants to the pilgrims who are the guests of God. On the contrary, the founding fathers of the House of Saud, they fought alongside the British colonial power against their own brothers, the Ottomans, to dismantle the Caliphate. Then they plotted with the British to gain their kingdom and have served the British and later the American interests till today. The House of Saud is no less of a colonial outpost as Israel is, which has been abundantly evident in the Gaza crisis. At the heart of it is a corrupt, monarchical, tyrannical regime that is beset with corruption, nepotism, bureaucracy, and incompetency, which acts as any capitalist viewing the Hajj, Umrah, and Pilgrims nothing more than a commercial revenue stream to generate billions through exploitation after it continues to squander billions in vanity projects. What can we do? Islam is a deen for the thinking Muslim. A Muslim is not fazed by dazzling lights and superficial structures, but rather looks beyond. With the backdrop of the Gaza genocide continuing unabated, I believe we owe it as a minimum to do three things. Number one, speak out against corrupt tyrannical regimes who serve as colonial outposts, squander wealth and resources to safeguard only colonial interests. Number two, raise awareness amongst the Muslim Ummah such that these regimes are held to account for their treachery of Islamic landmarks, resources, and obligations. And number three, call for the removal of such dictators and replace them with a representative and accountable, true Islamic leadership that is established to serve as a true servant to the pilgrims, the two sacred harams, and the message of the Prophet of Islam.